So why is the falling action, the return, so important? Because it really is kind of the exclamation point at the end of your sentence.
It's the taste that you will leave a reader with. Now, I'm a wine drinker. I know you don't really drink, but I'm a wine drinker.
Oh,
And wine has got a thing called the aftertaste. Yeah? So when you drink a really good mouthful of wine, it leaves a feeling in your mouth and a taste that lingers on your tongue. And the falling action is like that. It is the taste you're leaving in your reader's mouth where they go, I enjoyed drinking down that author's cup of wine. I think that I could have another one of those cups. They were great. They left me feeling good.
releasing your inner dragon. All right, Marie, tell me what this whole falling action is. That's a really weird statement or title. What is falling action?
Well, falling action is when a boy author and a girl author
No,
cuddle,
that was romance. That was romance. We're done with that one.
cuddle afterwards.
So it really just pertains to the boy author.
Well, the purpose of falling action is to unwind the tension gradually after the climactic moment of the book, and to show the consequences to the protagonists, to show how they've changed and what this means for their journey and their place in the world, and how the world has changed by their actions or not
So,
changed, as the case may be.
so from the hero's journey standpoint, we would call that the return.
Yes.
So it's the same thing.
Yes.
It's the thing that happens after the climax, to allow the reader to revel in the ramifications of the journey that we just took.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So
It's so that the reader has that experience of like, okay, because you've defeated the giant monster and it lies dead at your feet. Now what? What does this mean for you, for the journey that the reader's taken? That is what the falling action is.
so why is it important? Why would I do that?
So I think there's a couple of reasons why you would do that. The I guess the most important is first because the hero and the reader with them have just been on this journey. They've walked together for the whole of the story. And they have now reached the end of it. And it is almost like a leave taking. It's like a Midwestern goodbye. You need to take your time saying it so that people can feel the depth of it and they can put the hero to bed and walk away with the theme of the book, with the lessons of the book cemented in their head, and the happy that the heroes are in a place where they can leave them.
Yeah. So the way I kind of talk about the return, because I'm just going to call it the return.
It's
The,
fun.
the falling action seems way too pretentious for me. I'm much more simple-minded. Um, and the reason why we call it the return in the hero's journey is we're returning to the state of perfection. So the reason why I think it's important is we start off in a state of perfection. We show the reader what this character lives like, why they like the life that they live, and all of that. The inciting incident comes along and shatters that. And the whole reason why the character is moving forward in the story is really just to get back. They go forward to do this, to do that, to the other thing, so that they can just be done with this stuff and get back to their life the way it was. And I just think it's cruel if you take them forward, make them have to fight through all this stuff to kind of return back to some semblance of normalcy for themselves. And then they get that and you just end and it just goes away. Like they don't, like, you've convinced the reader that the reader is moving forward because they want to go back, but you never allow them to go back. you never allow them to go, hey, look, we did finally accomplish it. Now let's go back to that time before this inciting incident.
I want to chase a rabbit.
All right. Love rabbit.
Now, I don't know. Okay. So I am a more change-loving person. I believe that society can change for the better and should. And one of the things that I've been noticing over the past, I don't know, 5-6 years is that fantasy, conversely from science fiction, fantasy always seems to have a very traditionalist bent to it. The hero returns home and home is perfect. You just said it, the state of perfection. He's perfect at home, right? And it's reminded, and I'm not saying like you know, I'm just saying like it was in the wording there, and it reminded me of something, which is that in fantasy, so often the solution is we'll kill the bad king and then everything is fine, because it's not that a government of nobles is the problem. No, no, no. We just have to kill the bad people and that's fine. Like, no, the institution of people being born better is kind of the problem. And there's very little societal change in fantasy. And I wonder if it is because the hero's journey is so prevalent in fantasy, whereas in science fiction, there quite often is societal change.
Well, I can't think of any. So let's chase that rabbit. What are some examples that you're talking about in fantasy where because let me take a step back. Because when I'm teaching, I mean, we were talking about following action, so we're in the return, and I did bring up the state of perfection. So let's go back to that. So all stories start in only one of two ways. All stories, every single story is going to start in one of two ways: state of perfection or state of imperfection. And what I tell people is do not lock into the word perfection. It does not mean perfect. That's not what we're talking about here. That's just the term that Joseph Campbell used. And so that's a term we still use to this day. What it means is if you're starting in a state of perfection, it means one, the inciting incident has not happened yet. And two, the world that the character lives in is fine for them. So like as good as it gets, that movie. When we meet Jack Nicholson's character, he's a racist bigot. He is horribly lonely and he hates his life. But it starts in a state of perfection, because if he lived that life until he died, he would be fine with it. He doesn't want it to change. He's not going, oh, wow, I'm really lonely. I should do something about this. He's like, you know what? I'm really lonely, but it's okay. Don't mess with me.
Yeah. I get where you're going with this, because the perfection at the end could be a different state of perfection.
Well, it can never be the state of the same. I mean, like my parents get killed, and so now I'm shoved into this thing, but I'm really just trying to get back to my state of perfection. I'm not going to bring my parents back to life. They were killed as the inciting incident. So like Luke Skywalker, you know, his aunt and uncle get killed in the inciting incident. He's not getting his aunt and uncle back.
Right. But
he's going to get back to some semblance of life where he's not running and gunning and fighting this stupid empire and all this other stuff. So don't lock into the word perfection, because it can never be the same. I mean, look at Lord of the Rings. We go back. Frodo is just irrevocably changed, and so is the Shire and a lot of the hobbits. Even in the Hobbit, when Bilbo goes back, things are not the way they were when he left.
But here's the odd thing, right? Look at what happens. The person who has changed in Tolkien's work leaves to go somewhere else. Not that the knowledge they have brought back enriches and changes their society, because if there is one man who was a traditionalist, it's Tolkien, right? So they don't come back with that knowledge and change their society. No, they realize that they no longer fit their society because of the knowledge that they have gained, and they leave. There is a lot of like, I mean, obviously, like, you know, one can read a lot into everything, you know, but
The
but there,
curtains are blue because the author
yeah,
is obviously saying,
exactly. But but it is interesting to look at let's take another popular example, Harry Potter, right? What changes in the magical society at the end of that saga? Nothing.
Lucius is still a piece of garbage. The Death Eaters are
Every
still kind of in power.
everything, yeah, every structural thing that created the circumstances for Voldemort to rise to power is still left exactly in place. The attitude of humans towards non-human magical users unchanged. It's the same. It's,
Yeah,
you know, and I was just struck by it when you said the return, because I was like, because I've been on a man, I wish fantasy would have more structural societal change, because I feel like so often the message of fantasy is, no, it's not the structure's fault. If you kill the king, that'll be fine. No, you've got to address the problems that allowed this maniac to take control in the first place.
yeah. From a pragmatic standpoint,
Yeah.
that becomes, it's like, then you're just going to write a never-ending story, because you have to continue down that path, and it's not just the return. But no, I get what you're saying.
I
Now,
mean, I mean, you can always stop before the revolution takes hold, right? You can lay the seeds of revolution,
right.
because, dear God, afterwards you've stuck with a whole new problem as
Well,
the revolution falls apart.
but I think so many returns do that, or so many
Yeah,
falling actions do that. I mean, look at V for Vendetta. We don't
yeah,
know what the society is going to be like after
right.
the fall of the government. We just know that we've taken out the government, and the people have realized that they were wrong in giving up social freedoms for
Yeah,
safety. Yes, they were safe, but they really weren't, because then they allowed for this tyrannical regime to rise. And so they shuck that off, knowing that they're going to live in a more chaotic
yeah.
society and be less safe, but everyone is going to be more free to pursue their own lives. Same thing with As Good as It Gets. I mean, at the
And
end of that,
yeah,
Jack Nicholson's character is not a non-racist anti-bigot. He's still a racist bigot. He's just not. He's on the path. He's on the path. He sees his mistakes. He is working on it. He's actively trying to be a better person. He's actually got someone that probably is going to end up being his wife.
hmm,
Maybe, they're kind of in that. She's like, no, you're going to ask me to be your girlfriend. Like, you're going to do this. I'm going to make you
yeah.
do this, even though it's uncomfortable for you. So, but we don't get it.
Did
We
you
have to
did you
stop
ever
before
watch the movie? Did you ever watch the movie Equilibrium?
that. Maybe.
Christian Bale. It has this, like, people take these injections to
Yes.
suppress their emotions. Yeah.
Oh, no. I was thinking of the one where he takes the pill and he's super smart.
No, no, no. So this is one, like, everybody, there's this thing that goes off during once a day, and everybody takes these injections,
Mm-mm.
and it's an amazing movie. It's got a thing called gun fu in it, gun katas, which is just, I mean, it was obscene and over the top, but it was fantastic. But it also had, like, that obviously he doesn't just end the government, he removes the entire thing of, like, suppressing your emotions in order to be a more docile human, in order to um and the thing is, every example we've mentioned where there's that kind of change is more on the sci-fi side
Yeah.
than on the
The funny thing
fantasy
is,
side.
I
Hmm?
just wrote down Total Recall. And I was
Yes.
like, oh, I got another one. Oh, wait, right.
Yeah.
That is sci-fi.
It's more sci-fi than fantasy. Classic fantasy, is much more prone to this kind of traditionalist. It's interesting, right?
Yeah, no, it is. However, and before this podcast, I
Yeah.
had thrown this out and you were like, oh, we've already talked about that. Don't talk about it. So I'm going to talk about something you told me not to talk about,
Yeah.
because this also made me think about something in a different way. So I poo-pooed on Abercrombie's
Mm,
First Law series because of the
yeah.
fact that, and even though you didn't finish it, the climax happens a third of the way into the last book, and
Yeah.
then the rest of it he's just screwing over his characters.
Yeah.
However, if instead of looking at it like that, thinking about it as an author who went, you know what? I'm going to try to do a longer form falling action
Mm.
and really see what can happen. That's actually now interesting. It's making me look at the Joe Abercrombie stuff in a completely different way of I'm trying to change society. I come back to it and society won't let me change it. Even though
Mm.
I've done this, this journey, and that's why the king, the guy who wants to be king becomes king, but becomes a puppet king. The the two people that want to become a couple and romance, and they get married, and then she murders him in a fit of rage and goes to jail or gets hung for it, I think is what happens. And like all of these horrible things happen to these characters. So even though I hated that, just thinking about that from a fantasy standpoint, I don't know. And I don't know Joe. So I've
It
never met him in my travels. And even though I know a
Yeah.
lot of authors, but maybe I'll take a step back and say maybe Joe was exploring something different that I wasn't even thinking about. He was
Like
trying to explore
society is resistant to change, and even if you come back with the knowledge, that doesn't mean that you can change it.
right. So maybe all that journey was not just to show that we're going to screw my characters over to make the readers
Mm.
feel better. That's the way I took it. Now
Yeah.
remember that was pre-Drake, so I
Yeah.
read it as a fan, not as I
Yeah.
didn't have any of this. I wasn't teaching writing and
Yeah.
writing professionally and all this other stuff. So obviously I looked at writing different back then than I do now. But back then it pissed me off as a fan because I'm like, I love these characters and you just dicked them over. You did that against me. You attacked me. And so I've kept that animosity this whole time literally until you just said that. And I was like, huh, I wonder if Joe was exploring this whole return a
Mm.
little bit deeper and what, trying to maybe there's something. I mean, I haven't read it since back then. So it's been over 20 years since I've read it.
Yeah.
I'm like, maybe I should go back and reread it just to see, with that set of eyes, to see if he's actually exploring something that as a reader, I just didn't get. I just
Yeah.
didn't understand what he was exploring. So I was just pissed that he was screwing over the characters that I loved, and I couldn't get past that. Maybe he was actually exploring. So I'm not saying he is. I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, maybe you can tell us down below if you're a huge Abercrombie fan. Let us know if I'm
It,
missing something, if I did miss
yeah.
something or whatever. So that might be interesting.
It could be, as far as I know, Abercrombie does like to explore deep, dark themes. Like it is his, he does lean on the tragic, dark themes.
Yeah, he's a
Um,
grimdark
yeah,
writer.
yeah. So yeah, could be.
Eh,
But yeah, so
I may
yeah.
not hate Joe Abercrombie as much as I thought I did.
There we go. Then today has been an interesting day.
Because that would be interesting to me as a writer now to think about exploring those topics.
Mm.
It's not going to say that he succeeded. I'm not saying
Yeah.
that. I'm saying it's interesting. Like for the longest time, I always had this dream of writing a story where I just killed off main characters for no reason whatsoever. I was like, this would be so awesome, it'd be so great. And then, Martin did it. And I was like, oh, yeah, no, that really does suck for the readers. I'm not doing that. Thanks, you know, George, for letting
Yeah.
me know that I don't want to do that, even though I thought about doing it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't mind other people. I mean, what do they say? A smart man learns from their own mistakes. A wise man learns from other people's
Yeah.
mistakes.
100%.
So,
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, but it is interesting that so much of fantasy is the more like society doesn't change.
yeah,
And I sometimes wonder if it is because, like, if you think of the grandfather of fantasy, your answer is going to be Tolkien, and Tolkien was a traditionalist in the sense he wanted us all to live on farms in the countryside, right? He didn't even like the Industrial Revolution. And if you think of the father of science fiction, your mind heads more towards
you're
Frank
talking about
Herbert and
Asimov.
Dune and Asimov, also hard science fiction.
Yeah, I
And
would not
both of them,
consider Herbert the godfather of science fiction.
and both of them drove for change in societies. Both of them were progressive.
I've got one.
Yeah.
I've got a fantasy one. The Guardians of the Flame series
100%. 100%.
came
He
in and just
absolutely,
shattered that
but
entire
one
fantasy world.
in all that
Right.
you know what I mean? Like,
So it wasn't the characters from that world who then realized their world's issues and changed it. It was
yeah,
people from our world bringing our moral compass. Wait a minute, we got rid of slavery. What are you guys doing? This is
yeah,
evil. And they're like, it's not evil. It's slavery. And so
yeah,
it was definitely our society
yeah,
imposing our moral will on them.
100%. But our society did also grow, you
Yes.
know, like we no longer have widespread slavery in our, yes, you can argue that there are elements, et cetera, but I mean, we don't have that kind of institutionalized slavery anymore. We
Yeah.
condemn that kind of behavior. We are making progress.
Although, and I haven't fact checked this, so I could be
Yeah,
completely wrong on it, and it's not an area that I'm really that interested
yeah.
in, but I have read on the internet, so it must be true. No, I don't even remember where I read it, but that there is more people physically in slavery today than there was at the height of slavery.
Um, I
Talking about
don't,
just sheer numbers.
I don't think that is. I don't think that
Well,
that is
when
true
you
in a
think about
physical sense, but I mean, it does. I'm not going to
the
research
Uyghurs
it.
in China and all the
Yeah,
stuff that's happening, and
yeah,
that's
yeah,
what I heard. And again, I haven't fact checked. I have no idea if it's right. Not this
yeah.
is not a show about that. We don't get
No,
into topics like
no.
that.
Yeah.
This
I'm.
is
I'm not.
that
I'm not going to go into research. It's.
basically you just went optimistic and said, look at us getting so much better. And then I had to go, no, 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 we're still pieces of garbage. That's really what
Well,
that was about.
I do think we get like I would much rather be alive now
Oh, yeah.
than a
I mean,
hundred years ago, than
air
200 years
conditioning.
ago,
That's
than
all I
a
care about.
yeah, like like um and not just from a technological standpoint, but it's me as a woman. I would much rather be alive
Yeah.
today than even 50 years ago.
Me as a man too. And not just because of air conditioning.
Yeah, yeah. So,
It's nice to go, man, I'm going to go buy some groceries today and not have to go, where's my spear? And where's my,
100%. But it's also
armor so
nice
I don't get
to,
killed and eaten while I'm out there trying to get food for myself and my family.
but it's also nice to have a vote. It's nice to be able to work. It's nice to be able to open a bank account without, like, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I think we're all in agreement that all of us are happier to be, or at least most of us. There is some people
yeah,
out there that are, I mean,
yeah.
actually, it's kind of funny because my youngest son is like, I'm like, what are you going to do with your life and all? And he's like, I'm going to save up enough money, buy a tent and some hunting equipment, and I'm going out and I'm just going to live rough in the woods for the rest of my life. What
Okay.
he wants. I mean, that's what he wants right now at 20.
Yeah,
What he
yeah,
wants next year at 21 will probably be completely different.
yeah.
So, yeah.
But yeah,
All right.
so anyway, getting back to this. So falling action is basically it's not the denouement exactly, right? But it includes the kind of that denouement level.
Yeah.
And
So to get back to because we think we kind of got off track with that.
hmm,
So when I'm teaching the return, I teach them, what the state of perfection, state of imperfection is. And just to finish that little thing up. So state of perfection happens before the inciting incident, which allows the reader to get to know the character and the world and what they love. The only thing starting in a state of imperfection means is that you're starting the story after the inciting incident has happened.
hmm,
So now you still have to do everything you did if you had started the story in the state of perfection, just now it becomes backstory.
hmm,
But we still have to show the reader what the character's life was like before the inciting incident. We still have to make the reader care about this character and what they love and what they hate and all of that. It's just now harder because we have to do it as backstory.
yeah,
So as the one I always used for that example is the Shawshank Redemption. When
hmm,
that movie opens up, we're in a car with Andy Dufresne and he's fondling a pistol and he's drunk. He's
yeah,
got a half drunk bottle of booze. And it's visual, so we can't do this in a novel. So I'm cheating here. But we get the voiceover of the court case where he's being convicted of murdering his wife and murdering her lover. But we know he did it. Like we're in the car with him and he's drunk and he's got a pistol. He killed her. Like there's no doubt in our minds. But that's the inciting incident. The inciting incident of him killing his wife and her lover, has already happened when the story starts. So now we have to do that as a backstory, all that stuff. So that's the only difference between a state of perfection and state of imperfection, is where the inciting incident is. Most stories start in a state of perfection so that we can get to know everything and fall in love with the character, and then the inciting incident happens, and then we move through our story. So my point was, if I'm going to, make you fall in love with the character's world and what they love, and then I'm going to be mean and shatter that, and you're going to be shattered just as long as, just right along with the character. And so now you're going to want to get back to that state of perfection, just like that character wants to get back to the state of perfection. So you're going to follow them through all this crappy journey that I'm going to force you to go through. And then, yes, you overcome, and that feels good, but then I never give you the ability to kind of succeed. Like, because just because you win the race, what if you like worked your whole life to run this race, you finally get a chance, you run the race, you come across the finish line, and then that's it. You die, you have a heart attack, everything goes black. I mean, that kind of sucks. It'd be nice to be able to stand up on the winner's podium and actually get the medal and have your friends and family be like, oh my God, you're so amazing. I can't believe you did that. That's really what the return is. It's that moment that, yes, we crossed the finish line first. Yes, we won. We won the race. But I mean, I'd like to get the medal. I'd like to have my mom hug me and congratulate me for a hard, effort well done. That's what the return is. It's just allowing the reader to actually be benefited by winning the journey. That's it. And that's the way I teach it.
Yeah. I tend to lean into like the consequences of the change. When I'm thinking about it, I tend to lean into like the consequences of the change, the consequences of the plot, and so on. As I said, I am on this kick of like, societies must change. This static society thing is nonsense. Even if they change for the worse, they must change. Like,
that's what I'm against.
Democracies must become empires if bad people win. These things must happen.
I don't want that. I don't want change to be bad.
If you look at the way the governments developed, right? We were tribal governments, we were theocracies, we were democracies, we went back to kingdoms, then we had a revolution, chopped off kings' heads. I mean, it's changed. The point is, if there's not change, it is nonsense to say it won't change. Like,
oh, I agree with that. I just really would like for us to change and just keep getting better instead of change and then fall back into darkness and then come back into the light and then fall back into darkness. And like, because the problem is that the people that are caught up in the change when it changes to the darkness, just millions and millions of people die. And, as a bleeding heart liberal, that just makes me so sad. I hate all the people that have died for no reason than for change.
I mean, I would argue that the French nobles who were fed to the guillotine probably felt that they were dying for no reason, but they were dying for democracy.
And I wasn't talking about them. I was actually talking about the change from when we went from prosperity in France to everybody starving and wanting to chop the people's head off. I'm talking about those people. I'm not talking about the people who got the head chopped off because they're the ones who made everyone starve. Like, screw those people, chop their heads off. They all deserve it. Or at least some of them did. I'm sure some people in there were. There was a feeding
were
frenzy.
A lot of people fed to the guillotine. I'm pretty certain many of them were innocent.
Yeah. So things get chopped when whatever. But I'm talking about the before that. I'm talking about take that the leadership took society to the point where just hundreds of thousands of people starved to death, because that's what you have to get to for society to make that kind of. It's not like the French were like, we miss breakfast. Kill all the nobles.
No. Like I always say, like, revolution doesn't come from nowhere. People have to be driven into a corner before they're willing to embrace revolution,
or at least feel that they are.
Yeah, they must really feel that they are at
the
yeah.
But that's what makes my bleeding liberal heart cry, is the it's just all the suffering and all of the innocent children that starve to death because children starve before adults. And
Yeah.
like, it just kills me. It just literally, I hate humanity. It's one of the reasons why I like living in my fantasy worlds. And it also maybe, just to get play devil's advocate, it
Yeah.
may be why we tend to go, look, if we just kill that bad king, everything's great again. Because that's what we want. We're fantasy fulfilling. We don't
Yeah.
want to go through
We
the
don't want to go through the pain of examining our societal structures and going like, well, actually, maybe this is problematic.
right.
Like maybe the problem is actually the structure of our society, and we actually need to go through a very painful change.
Yeah.
Because societal change is never simple, you know.
Everyone, no, I don't think a lot of people realize how much of an insult this is, but it's an incredibly horrible insult. The Chinese proverb, may you live in interesting times. It's not a good thing. That's that's somebody that's wishing you suffering, pain, and death. That's because that's interesting times.
Yep, that is
So,
interesting times.
yeah, and unfortunately, I feel like the first 40 years of my life, we didn't live in interesting times, and I feel like we're starting to live in very interesting times now.
Uh,
I don't like, I want to be boring. I like boring.
I would love to be boring, but we have a very not boring neighbor to our east, so
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I get it. I get it. I definitely get it. But no, I think that might be a devil's advocate kind of side for that, is that we just want to fantasy fulfill. That's why I mean, that I truly believe. And I teach this to all the people that come to me. Your job
Mm,
is to be a vehicle for other people to fantasy fulfill inside of.
yeah.
Like, that's what a storyteller's job is. We are here to allow them to escape their reality. And then it just depends on what you're attracted
But
to.
but we still want them to walk away with lessons
Oh,
that make them better people.
right. That's our job.
Yeah.
But what they want from us, I mean, they
Mm.
don't come to us and go, you know what? I might be a little racist.
Yeah.
So could you take me on a lesson to show me that being a little racist is bad? That's not what they're here for. They're not coming to us for that. We're
Yeah.
going to do that because
Yes.
that's our job.
Yeah.
But they're coming to us going, I just want to escape my reality.
No,
Can you just
100%.
fun for me?
100%. And we do need to be cognizant of that. But
Yeah.
we still need to, like, I'm not saying every book has to end with massive societal change. Obviously, that's also not realistic. Like, come on now. I'm just saying there's very few that
Yeah.
in fantasy specifically deal with societal change.
And in the 15 minutes that I've spent time thinking
Mm.
about it, I can already see that that's a very
Yeah.
difficult, bigger pro. And like I said, that's what took me back to Joe Abercrombie with like, maybe, because obviously he was on this writing road way before me, because he was a
Mm.
professional author well before I was even
Yeah.
thinking about this. So maybe that is and if I ever get the chance to sit down with him, I'm definitely going to ask that question. That is something I'm going to talk to him about. Um, so Joe, if you're listening, give me a call. Um, but yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
But that's it in a nutshell. When I'm kind of teaching, that's the 1,000-foot view of me teaching what the return is and why it's important, because I do think it's important. You just took them on this big journey and you let them cross the finish line. You should. And I just learned that from when I would go, because the movies are bad at this. Books are
Yeah.
not normally bad at this. I mean, we can go through all these things. We talked about Harry Potter. We talked about
Lord of the
Lord of
Rings,
the Rings. We talked about,
famously long falling action.
yeah.
Famously.
But even Star Wars,
Yeah.
because Star Wars, the New Hope, the first one, does exactly what I said. They blow up the Death Star, and then they stand on the podium and they get medals. Like,
Yes.
they literally just have the medal ceremony, and that's
Yeah.
it. And even that is still good enough.
Yeah.
A lot of movies will end with the Death Star going boo,
Yeah.
and then the credits start rolling. And it's like you don't get any chance to do anything. Again, books don't
You
normally
don't
do
get
that.
any closure to use a modern word. You don't get any closure on the story.
Yeah. Yeah. You win, but what does that mean now? What does it mean for you? Now, I think there is a flip side to that. I think because like the Genesis saga, none of the books have what's it called? Falling action. None of
But
them
the
have returns
story
until the end.
hasn't reached an end.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I put in falling action in the first book of Sangwell, in
Mhm.
Hidden Blade. And the reason why was because when I wrote Hidden Blade originally, I was like, I am not 100% sure I have the gumption for the entirety of the saga. So I'm going to give the reader a conclusion at the end of it. I'm going to leave them at a place where they don't feel like, oh my God, I need the next book.
Right.
Because I don't want to leave them hanging. Then it turns out that I'm actually fine. And now I've written, and the others, none of the other books have that falling action because they
Right.
all follow on from each other.
Right. They're one contiguous story as opposed to like the Harry Potter series, where every single Harry Potter series has a return because every single one has one problem that we're going to deal with. We're going to resolve that problem, and then we're going to see how resolving that problem has affected the world around Harry and changed Harry. And we're going to get that moment to revel in that return.
Yeah.
And then we're done. You literally could be finished and you don't have to read the next one. And then, if you do, we're going to resolve that one and all that. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's, like what you just said, you wanted to have a standalone book so that you basically had an out. Hey, I don't know if I'm gonna write the next book. I don't know if I'm interested in it. I don't know if it's going to be successful. I don't know, whatever your reasons were. It could be a million different things. So you gave that return, which gives a more satisfying ending for the audience.
Yeah.
Farmers was my 9th novel that I wrote. It was my first that was ever professionally published, but it was the 9th that I had written. And so when I sat down and started plotting out the Genesis saga, I knew it was a 5-novel saga. I plotted it out. I know where I'm going. I've got it all lined out. And so I don't have a falling action at the end of that book. It just ends. It ends. Now, when you do that, understand it is vitally important that you do have the crossing of finish lines. You just don't need to do the what now, how does that affect the world around them and them? So everyone crosses a finish line. There's 5 characters in the book, and all 5 of them cross a finish line at the end of the book in their last chapters. But that's all you get. They just cross the finish line. And then you're like, okay, but and then that's what gives you that desire. Because I don't have hard hooks. There's one that has a hook. None of the others have a hook. All the rest of them are just crossing of the finish line, but it's still, even that without, I don't mean hook. They all have hooks. Sorry.
Yeah.
Doesn't have a cliffhanger.
Yes.
That's the word I meant to use. Only one has a cliffhanger. And it's the one that's actually the last chapter of the book. So not only is it, the one with the cliffhanger, but I put it last because I wanted the last chapter to have the cliffhanger. Why didn't I do the others to have a cliffhanger? First of all, the book wasn't done.
Yeah.
So that's just mean. But also I knew that you didn't need it. Like just crossing the finish line and then fading to black, the audience still has that, okay, but what does that mean? What does that do? How does that affect things? Yeah, they beat the bad or they, whatever. So you still have to cross the finish line. You talked about one thing that I think fits well with this, where you were reading something and you were dragged all the way to this big climactic battle. And you were so excited about the battle, and then you get there, and the last chapter is we cross the hill, or we crest the hill, and there's the big battle we're about to have.
Yeah.
End of the book.
Yeah.
And you were like, snap.
I actually didn't read the book that follows on from that.
Yeah.
I was like, you leave me on that kind of cliffhanger, I no longer trust you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that every reader is me. I don't know how many readers you'll lose with that kind of cliffhanger, but that author certainly lost me.
Yeah. So I do believe that you have to cross the finish line.
Yeah.
What I do is I just didn't, that's it. And then the next book, you get new problems, new things, and you cross the finish line. And the next book, new things, new problems, you cross the finish line. But each one builds on the last, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
If I think about Magic Fall, which is the book that we wrote together that you should all read, links in the description. And
Get signed copies from starvingwriterstudio.com, signed
yep,
by both me and Marie when we were together.
yep.
Got a
So
warehouse full of
you should totally buy some signed copies. You can't get my signature very easily. I'm in Finland, so
yeah. And if you're in Finland, well, you're going to pay a lot for shipping, but you can't get my signature very easy.
so there they defeated the bad guy, and literally the falling action is just them getting everything and fleeing. That's it. There's no celebrating in the victory. There's no return to the city, which is because that's where all of their motivation is. You know, Lyron's father, Buri's mother, not mother, her sister, like all of these things are in the city. That's where their motivation is. That was, if we were writing a standalone novel, they'd return to the city.
Because we have loose threads that we have to tie up.
Exactly.
So that's interesting. So when we started this, and the topic is going to be the falling action, I really don't use that term. And so that's why, you know, to me, it's the same thing as the return.
Yeah.
However, what you just said is really interesting, because from a structural hero's journey standpoint, Magic Fall does not have a return.
Yes.
However, it does have a falling action. We do have a moment where we allow the readers to catch their breath.
Yes.
We do have that. We cross the finish line, and then we have another chapter where the readers get to kind of have that dip in the tension, and hey, look, we survived this. Let's take a moment to kind of stew in that revelation and have this moment. And it's a really good scene between Buri and Lyron, and you know, the flying cat and all of that. And it's, you know, he gets the little Land Rover thingy, and like it's a nice little scene, and it gives the reader that moment to just enjoy the win.
Yep.
I would never call that a return, though, from a hero's journey structure standpoint.
No, because it's not a return, but it is a falling action. So there is a subtle difference.
Until that moment, I know the whole time I've been thinking, why are we calling it a falling action? It's just a return. It's just a return. It's just that shows me that it's not. It's actually a little different than the return.
So I would say that the return is always falling action. Like the return is within falling action. But falling action is not necessarily the return.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you can have the falling action without the actual return of the hero's journey.
Who says you can't teach an old dog new tricks? Look at us learning stuff all the time.
Yeah. So
that's why you should share this podcast and like it and subscribe to it.
Yes. Because we learn stuff all the time.
Every episode. No, that's really cool.
So let's talk a little bit about, I guess, some of the examples of falling action. So we've talked about Lord of the Rings, which has a very long falling action. It's the Aragorn returning to the city, Minas Tirith, and in the houses of healing, and then the hobbits returning to the Shire and kicking out, I forget who'd taken over the Shire.
The orcs were there.
Yeah, but it was led by some person.
Yeah.
Anyway. And then getting on the grey ships and going to the west and all of that.
The elves.
Yeah.
And Bilbo.
Sam and Rosie marrying.
Yeah.
Yeah, which was very pretty. So that is a very, very long section. And I think it was so long because Tolkien wanted to show where every character finally ends up and really put them to bed for the reader.
Yeah. Let's contrast that with the last book of Harry Potter.
Yeah. So the last book of Harry Potter, The Deathly Hallows, is a like
well, but she does all of those same things. It's just that she does them kind of as just this telly.
Yeah.
This
she literally goes, okay, so you've had the final climactic battle. People have died. like stuff's happened. It's things. And then we jump to, I don't know, I think it's 10 years later. Or
Isn't it, if I remember, because I only read it once and when it came out, so it's a long time ago, but isn't it Harry and Jenny now married and they're dropping their kid off to the train?
yes, yes,
Yeah.
that's correct. Yeah. She jumps from, you've literally just had the climactic battle. No, there's no falling action here. She goes from there to epilogue.
Yeah.
Um, so I would say that yeah, I would say it doesn't have falling action. It has an epilogue
Yeah.
that tells you
And
what the end is.
to me, it felt more like, and I don't know
Yeah.
Rowling, I don't have any way of verifying this. You can, I know
Mm,
there's a lot of hardcore Harry Potter fans out there, so you can rip us apart in the comments below. It's fine.
yeah.
Um, to me, it felt like a move of an author who's like, I am so sick of writing this. I'm going to write a chapter that makes sure that no one asks me to write another chapter from here. I'm going to just put the definitive, this is done. Don't bother me ever again. I now
I,
have more money than God. I
yeah.
don't need to do this anymore. Leave me alone.
I also got strong, like I'm so over this series from that
And to
last
me, that was
epilogue.
kind of an insult as a
Yeah.
fan, because again, I read that before pre-Drake.
Mm.
And I don't know, just to me, it felt like a kind of almost a slap in the face. Like, I know you took this journey and I know you love all this stuff, and I know you would be really excited for me to continue it, but screw you. I'm done. Leave me alone. Get off
Yeah.
my lawn.
Yeah, I agree. Like the end of Harry Potter was very it was very like for the journey I'd been on. And I mean, I like kids who read, kids today, like listen to me, kids today, kids today, like they don't know what that phenomena was like because it was pre-internet, right?
Hmm.
So when like I think it was book 4 or book 5 came out, there was no concept of ebooks yet. Okay, we didn't
Mm-mm.
have smartphones. So I had ordered a physical copy and it was a worldwide release. All the stores across the world opened at the same time. Okay, I think it was Greenwich midnight or something like that. They all opened and were allowed to start selling Harry Potter. These were worldwide events. I was standing in a queue in the middle of the night to pick up my copy of Harry Potter.
Me too.
Yeah, right. And I picked it up, I went home and I read it that night. Like,
Pretty sure it was the fourth book when that
yeah,
finally exploded and became the
yeah,
phenomenon it was.
yeah. And it we'd been on this incredible journey with it. It had been a worldwide cultural phenomenon. And then we hit the last book, and it's just like, okay, we've beaten Voldemort. I'm done with you now.
Yeah.
It's like, hello?
Lord of the Rings felt like they were paying homage to us, the
Yeah,
fans, of let me put this to bed. Let me give
yes,
you time. Let me reward you for this harrowing adventure you just took. Here is your payment, reader.
yes.
And but I mean, even the whole last book kind of smelt like I'm so tired of writing this. I just don't feel like,
Rowling's book, yes. Yeah.
yeah,
The
yeah,
last book of Harry Potter, I was like, she's just doing this to get it done. Like,
it's what it felt like.
yeah.
Not, we're not digging on Harry Potter,
No.
guys. We're both obviously huge fans. We literally
Mm.
both just said we were standing in line waiting
Like,
for our copies.
yeah.
Um, but it just, even though I enjoyed the last book, it
Mhm.
just had a lingering odor of I just don't want to do this anymore. And so
Yeah.
that shows in the writing. And then the ending of it is what really
Yeah.
kind of capped it off for me of oh, this is her just telling me to
Mm.
leave her alone. Like
Whereas, yeah. Whereas
this
what
wasn't for
Tolkien,
me.
yeah. And what Tolkien did was he very, very gently took you by the hand and allowed you to see the characters through and like showed you everything that has happened and puts the whole thing to bed. It makes you feel appreciated as a
Yeah.
reader.
And again, even though I might be looking at the Abercrombie stuff a little different now,
Mm,
it is why I hated the ending of Abercrombie, and so many people do, is because he was like, haha, so you just took this journey. Now let me kick you in the teeth. And then when you fall down, I'm going to stomp your head. And then, when you curl up in a ball to protect yourself, I'm going to just keep kicking you anyway. Like, so it felt like an attack from
Yeah.
the author. So, I mean, that gives you three different things. One that feels like an author that's actually thanking you for taking this journey with them. One that's telling you, look, I don't care. Just go away. I'm done. And then the other, it's like, yeah, we're not done yet because I'm going to abuse you now. So why is the falling action, the return, so important? Because it really is kind of the exclamation point at the end of your sentence.
It's the taste that you will leave a reader with. Now, I'm a wine drinker. I know you don't really drink, but I'm a wine drinker.
Oh,
And wine has got a thing called the aftertaste. Yeah. So when you drink a really good mouthful of wine, it leaves a feeling in your mouth and a taste that lingers on your tongue. And the falling action is like that. It is the taste you're leaving in your reader's mouth where they go, I enjoyed drinking down that author's cup of wine. I think that I could have another one of those cups. They were great. They left me feeling good.
or in Joe Abercrombie's case, just a really bitter flavor. I don't think I'm reading anything. And unfortunately, I've never read any. I've read pieces of some of his stuff. I know he's a fantastic writer, but I just
There,
still have that lingering taste from the
there
first
are
loss.
there are people in this world who really like very, very dry wine.
Yep. Yep. There's a fan base for everybody.
Yep. So
So
yeah,
do we want to run through the questions
sure.
that our producer, um, and I didn't mention her name last time because we never even talked about it, but her name is Monique. She is kind of the reason why we're a little bit more organized. We chase a lot of rabbits today, but we're at least a little bit more organized, and the thumbnail changes and the topic changes and all of that. Monique has done a great job of helping us get this in a much better state. So we already talked about what is it, why is it important, and why should it be included. I think we've covered that.
Yep.
It's that gift to the fans,
Mm.
that closure. They know that the story is over. They feel good about it. They've had time to consume it.
Your pacing for the falling action should be slower. You've had the climactic moment. You want to slow it down. You not obviously like completely, but you want to turn it gentler and slow it down and really give the reader time to appreciate the moment.
Here's the thing that I think a lot of writers miss. It's not about writing fast or writing slow. It's about how much loyalty have you earned. That's why me and Marie are so hell-bent on, saying no flashbacks in your opening chapter, no info dumping in your opening chapter, because you've earned nothing.
Yeah.
So you're still in the I need to impress you phase. You're still in the date, that first date phase where it's like I'm wearing my best suit and I've combed my beard and hair really well and I've brushed my teeth really good and I put on some nice cologne, as opposed to being married 23 years where you're like, yeah, let's go out to dinner. Like, I don't think that bad. So by the time you get past that climax, you've earned your loyalty, your reader's loyalty. They love the story. They've been with you the whole time. They care about the characters. They're there. And now they just want to enjoy the afterglow.
Yes.
They the boffing is finished. We've already done all our sweating and all of that. And now, you know what? I just want to lay here. I want to lay here with you. I want to feel you, pressed up against me. We don't have to talk. We just
I told you this is going to come back to a boy author and a girl author.
Yeah, I mean, literally the thing right before this is called the climax. So you expect this happens after the climax. We said that at the beginning of this. So yeah, I mean, you've earned it. So you don't have to. Now, does that mean it can just be dry and boring and crappy? No, that's not what I'm saying at all.
Yeah, it must still have there must still be things that the scenes accomplish. There must still be a reason to continue, a little bit of a plot thread, something to pull me on. All of that must still be there, but gentler, no longer with the urgency building
We're
up to the point.
done. It's
We're
it's now
done.
just it's
We're
post-coitus, and we're going to just
yeah,
lie in each other's arms and just be content and
yeah.
happy, and just I think that's the importance from it. And that's why the pacing,
Mm,
and that's throughout the entire thing. I mean, I talked about last night. Um, I kind of gave a little mini class, and we went through some of my chapters and why I do them. So, like, just look at this opening of my first book. So Ardari's first chapter, he's a farm boy. The only thing that happens in it, he wakes up, he goes downstairs, he eats breakfast, he goes to work. That's it.
mm,
That's all that happens. Now, it still has everything that we talk about here. It's still very engaging, very exciting. It pulls you through it.
mm.
There's tons of opening questions you want to drive. But it is still just a farm boy waking up, going downstairs, eating breakfast, and going to work. That's
Yeah.
it. But it's not chapter one. It's chapter two. It's his first chapter. So what is chapter one? Chapter one, nothing happens in it either, sort of, but a lot happens in it. And it's this big, brutal, brutish fighter monster dude that you meet. And it's very aggressive. And everyone who gets at the end of that one is just like, you know, strap me in. I'm there. You've got me hook, line, and sinkers. What it allows me to do is now go, okay, all right, you're all hyped up now. Let's slow it down a little bit, because I need to now world build, because I don't do any world building in that first one. That's one of the reasons why it is so exciting and all of that. Because now I'm like, okay, all right, cool, 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 cool. You're there. I've earned a little bit of loyalty. Now
Mm,
let's slow it down a little bit. And so you don't notice it because you're there.
yeah.
But I've got 5 characters to introduce, and I've only done 2. I could roll into the 3rd character, but I don't. I cheat and I go back to the lion dude, the big beast dude, and his next chapter is this massive, gory, exciting fight scene. Like, for 5,000 words, you were literally fighting for your life. It starts in the middle of a fight and it ends with it all over. And so, I give you this little moment of, okay, I've earned some loyalty, so let me world build a little bit. Give me a little time. It's gonna be a little, and then we just chat. And so, what's the next chapter? We're with one of the other characters, and we learn how magic works.
Mm,
But you're fine, because you just came off this huge high of that scene. So now I can slow it down and go, okay, all right. So, and then what's next? Well, we introduce another character in the 5th chapter at that point, but he's in the stands at the end of the fight, and then something also exciting happens to him as he's leaving the Coliseum. So, exciting chapter, a little bit slower. Exciting chapter, a little bit slower. And then exciting chapter, but not as exciting, obviously, as the actual fight scene.
yeah.
And by the end of those 5 chapters, if fantasy is your thing, more than likely than not, I own you.
Yeah.
You will stay. You're just so excited because I did my job of world building. You now know the world. You
Mm.
understand the culture. You understand, and that's all boring, but I gave it to you in a very palatable way. But I also just threaded through this massive, exciting, you know,
I dispute your
action.
world building is boring. Allegations?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Um, and a lot of that has come from you as well, because you are so good at world building. What I mean by that is, no, you're right. My
Yeah.
world building is not boring. Or at least it definitely isn't anymore. I'm not going to say it wasn't 20 years ago, but the point is it's still, when you compare the chapters to each other,
Yeah.
the 2nd chapter is nowhere near the 1st and 3rd chapter. The 4th
Mm.
chapter is nowhere near the 1st and 4th chapter, or 3rd chapter. And the 5th chapter is definitely on par with the 1st chapter, but not on par with the 3rd chapter. And my
Yeah.
point is, those are rolled out that way, and those scenes were developed that way for very specific reasons, and also to make sure that I never allowed my reader, so many fantasy books start with the first 3 or 4 chapters of, I'm a farm boy and I'm on a farm and I'm doing this stuff, and yeah, it's slowly rising, but
So that is boring, and I agree with you. But you know what's even worse? Let me start a fantasy book with a prologue of how the world started.
it's the 5 chapters of encyclopedia.
Kill me now.
in the
Those are the
80s and
books I
below.
read in the 80s, and please don't do that. That
Yeah.
writing style was popular in the 80s, but even then it was boring.
I don't think it was popular in the 80s. I think it was the only thing that existed in the 80s.
It was boring. It was
If
boring.
all if all we have to eat are cranberries,
No.
then they're good. They're cranberries. But
Yeah.
like I can't even imagine eating cranberries for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yes.
But if it's all you have,
Then
then
I
you gotta
guess
eat
that's
something.
what you eat. Yeah.
Gotta eat something.
Yeah.
So I don't think it was popular. I just think that fantasy, the guys that, because you got to remember, fantasy wasn't really, it was almost a forced genre because it was the publishing industry, because the publishing industry hated fantasy. It was a child,
Mm.
immature thing. I mean, so much so that Anne McCaffrey, who wrote Dragon Riders of Pern, if you said, "Man, I really love your fantasy series," she would slap you.
She's
No,
like,
I don't
it's
write
science fiction.
fantasy.
And it's like, there is no way that you could classify this as science fiction.
You have a dragon on your cover. That is not, but
No,
I
I know.
write
And
science.
I know why. I know
Right,
why she claimed that,
of
right?
course.
Because her dragons were genetically engineered natural creatures, blah blah. Like there's science explanation for all of it. And
Sure.
sure, sure. But that doesn't change the fact that have, you have people riding on dragons, and that is not science fiction.
And fighting with swords and
And
lances.
fighting with swords on a single planet. I'm sorry, it's
Yeah.
not science fiction.
Yeah. Well, and again, the big reason was there was the stigmatism at the time. So,
Yeah.
so you got to understand the stigma, and then you have the publishing industry because fans they're reading Lord of the Rings, they're reading um, the Conan books, the Pulp Fiction stuff at the time, and they're like, man, does anybody want to write? I mean, literally, Terry Brooks was kind of a mediocre mystery writer.
Yeah.
Um, and he was like, well, I'll give it a shot. And so, like, his publisher came to him and said, hey, do you think you can write this crazy thing called fantasy? Because we think people are buying it. And he's like, yeah, sure, whatever. I'm not making a huge living off of what I'm doing now. So, sure, let me try it. Like, it was, and that's why they're tropey, because these aren't, you take me and you and Sanderson and Jordan and Joel Rosenberg, obviously, you take our generation of writers and a little bit before us, we were fans of fantasy.
Yeah.
And so we grew up on the tropes and now we want to push that. We want to change that. We want to do something different. You take a David Eddings or a Terry Brooks or whatever, when they first got into it, I'm not going to say they aren't fans now, obviously, but when they first got into it, there really wasn't a fandom. So they were like, yeah, whatever. I'll if you're gonna pay me, I'll do that, sure. So they, what are they gonna do? Of course they're gonna be more tropey because they're gonna go, well, what is out there? Okay, Lord of the Rings, let me read it. Okay, well, I guess this is what they're looking for. So let me just do. That's why the Bulgaria never was like, oh, it's just a Lord of the Rings clone. Yeah, because David Eddings was not what you would. He didn't. There was no fandom to come from.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's but now we it's first of all it's a huge genre and massive fan base, and we don't need to do that.
Yeah.
So that's I don't even know why we got off on this rabbit chase. I'm looking at our list going, how did we get here?
Anyway, so falling action, you should have it. How long is falling action? I don't know. It can be anything.
It can
It
literally
depends. It
whatever
depends on where you are in the series, because like Magic Fall, we had literally a couple of pages. Tolkien at the end of his saga had a massive, many, many, many chapters.
Another thing that a lot of people don't know is that was actually just one novel. There was no three novels. It's just that when he turned it in, the printer was like, I don't have the technology to print this in one book. It doesn't exist. And so the publisher decided where to break it and turn it into 3 books.
Yeah.
So of course it wouldn't have falling action, anywhere in the middle, because it was literally, to Tolkien, one novel.
Yeah. But yeah, so its length depends, kind of on how you approach it and so on. And then we've spoken about the pacing, we've done the examples, the falling action starts after your climax. Yeah. I
Yeah.
guess those are our talking points.
Yep. Hopefully this gives you guys a really good understanding of falling action if you haven't thought about it. And again, until Monique sent us this, I had heard the term falling action, but I didn't literally, since I never kind of studied, I was just thinking that it was just falling action somewhere during the story, and maybe it was the sagging middle that we were going to be talking about or whatever. Again, I come into these things kind of blind, so it is what it is. But now that we understand what it is, you understand why it's important. You understand that you're doing your readers an injustice if you don't give them some benefit, some reward, some moment to consume, to just kind of to have that post-coitus bliss, that cuddling phase. So yeah, so hopefully you'll now look at your stories and go, oh, okay, no, I do owe it to my readers to give them something. So hopefully that will help you guys out.
Yep. And I think that is a good note on which to end this episode.
See you next time.
Good day to our esteemed listeners. I'm Marie Mullaney, and it has been a pleasure guiding you through the nuances of writing and world building. If our podcast has enriched your authorial journey in any way, please consider liking and subscribing. Sharing our content with your peers is a powerful way to support our mission and ensure we continue to deliver insightful and valuable episodes. Your engagement is greatly appreciated. For a deeper understanding of the topics we've discussed, head over to Just in Time Worlds on YouTube. It is a treasure trove where fantasy meets history and science. Every Tuesday, you'll find new videos that delve into the intricacies of world building, drawing from our rich real-world history. Whether you're a writer, a role player, or just a fantasy enthusiast, Just in Time Worlds offers unique insights that will enrich your perspective. Check it out and join the journey of crafting incredible worlds.
If you are ready to take your writing to the next level and work with a group of highly motivated, dedicated writers who are all working to not only improve their writing, but improve your writing, plus you get to work with me on a weekly basis, then I'll encourage you to check out writersroom.us. This is a website that I have created that I really wish I had 30 years ago. It's everything a writer needs to become a better writer. Not only do we do weekly critique sessions, both from other members as well as me, we have daily writing sessions, I do monthly classes, Q&As, we have activities, I do all sorts of learning exercises, such as I do a quarterly writing prompt contest, and just tons and tons and tons of things. So if you're ready to get serious about your writing and you want to actually finish that novel and have a chance of it being published, then I encourage you to head on over to the Writer's Room and join me there. And as a special promotion for listeners of Releasing Your Inner Dragon, I'll go one step more. If you would like to get 50% off for 3 months, reach out to me. There's a million ways you can do that. You can do it through starvingwriterstudio.com, drakeu.com, any of my social media such as LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, whatever. Reach out to me, say that you would like to check out the Writer's Room for 50% off, and I will send you a link that will allow you to do just that. So hopefully you're ready to start getting serious about writing, and I'll see you in the Writer's Room.